She raised her hand like she had done it 1,000 times before. Not fast, not angry, just certain. I remember the space between us more than the moment itself. The smell of overcooked lentils drifting from the stove, the soft tick of the wall clock behind her. My own breath caught halfway in my chest. That was the moment I caught her wrist, and everything that followed began right there. I had always believed that real disasters announced themselves loudly, shouting, slamming doors, broken dishes on tile. But this one came quietly in a borrowed kitchen under a yellow light that flickered when the refrigerator kicked on. My mother-in-law, Gloria, stood across from me with her lips pressed thin. Her fingers were stiff, manicured. Her wedding ring flashed once as her arm lifted. I didn't plan to stop her, my body just moved. My hand wrapped around her wrist, gentle but firm, and the room went so still I could hear the oil popping in the pan behind me. She looked shocked, not hurt, not scared, offended. "How dare you," she said softly, like a warning. That sentence followed me for months after, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because women like Gloria don't wake up one day and decide to raise their hand. They practice it in smaller ways first. Before all of this, my life was quiet, not perfect, just steady. I was married to her son Vaughn for 7 years by then. We lived in a modest 2-story house with creaky stairs and a backyard that never quite grew grass properly. I worked as a financial compliance manager for a regional investment firm. Numbers made sense to me, people less so. Vaughn was the kind of man who avoided conflict the way others avoided illness. He loved peace, especially when it was purchased at someone else's expense. Sunday dinners at Gloria's house were non-negotiable. Every week, same table, same white lace runner, same roast chicken that somehow always came out dry. Gloria liked things done her way, but she wrapped her control in politeness. She would smile while correcting you. Touch your elbow while reminding you that you were wrong. "Oh, sweetheart," she'd say, voice syrupy, "that's not how we do it in this family." And Vaughn would squeeze my knee under the table, a silent request. Let it go, so I did. I let it go when she commented on my cooking, when she asked loudly why I hadn't given her grandchildren yet, when she once rearranged my living room while I was at work because it felt unbalanced. She wasn't cruel, not openly, she was something worse, certain. The first time I felt something shift was over paperwork. Vaughn's father had passed years earlier, leaving Gloria in control of several small family-owned businesses, a logistics company, 2 rental properties, a catering service that mostly existed on paper. At dinner one night, Gloria mentioned cash flow problems. "Oh, it's nothing," she said, waving her fork, "just taxes and banks being difficult." But she looked at me when she said it. Later that evening, as I washed dishes, she stood beside me too close. "You work with finances," she said. "You must understand how to simplify things." The word simplify landed wrong. I smiled, kept my tone light. "I work in compliance, I don't simplify rules." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "We'll see." That was the first clue, small, easy to ignore, so I did. The second clue came from Vaughn. One night he came home late, smelling like stress and cheap coffee. He sat at the edge of the bed and rubbed his face with both hands. "Mom needs help," he said. "With what?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough. "She wants you to look over some documents." "Just to make sure everything's okay." I sat up, the sheets slid cold against my legs. "Vaughn," I said slowly, "if something is okay, I can't pretend it is." He didn't meet my eyes. "She's family." That sentence felt heavier than it should have. I finally saw the numbers a week later, bank statements, invoices, shell accounts that were too clean. It wasn't sloppy. That was the terrifying part. It was careful, intentional. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one I got at work when something was very wrong. Gloria was skimming. Tax evasion, misreporting income, using her children's names for accounts they didn't know existed, including Vaughn. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. This wasn't simplifying. This was a slow-moving collapse waiting to happen. That night I told Vaughn everything. He sat silently, his face pale. "She wouldn't," he said. "She already has," I replied. The confrontation didn't happen right away. Gloria preferred control. She waited until she had the advantage. It came on a Tuesday afternoon when Vaughn was at work and I was cooking in her kitchen, helping, she called it. She accused me of turning her son against her, of imagining things, of overstepping. And then, with that same calm certainty, she raised her hand. That's where the story truly begins. Because when I caught her wrist, I didn't just stop a slap. I broke an illusion. And Gloria never forgave me for that. After I caught her wrist, the room did not erupt. That part surprised me. There was no shouting, no sharp intake of breath from the doorway, no dramatic silence broken by footsteps running away. The kitchen simply settled back into itself. The stove clicked as the burner cooled. The lentils continued to burn at the bottom of the pot, giving off a bitter smell that would linger in the curtains for days. Gloria looked at my hand still hovering in the air, then at her own arm as if it belonged to someone else. I let go first, not because she demanded it, not because I was afraid, but because I understood something important in that moment. The slap had never been about anger, it had been about permission. She lowered her arm slowly and smoothed the sleeve of her blouse, careful and composed. Her mouth curved into a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "You've forgotten your place," she said, her voice was steady. Almost gentle, I turned off the stove. The lentils were ruined anyway. "I think," I said, keeping my tone even, "we should talk about the accounts." That was when her expression changed, not outrage, not fear, calculation. She studied my face, then stepped back slightly, putting the counter between us. "This isn't the time," she said. "You're emotional." I wiped my hands on a towel and folded it neatly as if order might help me think. "I'm not," I said. "I'm concerned." She laughed softly. "That's the problem with women like you," she replied. "You confuse concern with control." I picked up my bag. "I'll see myself out." She didn't stop me. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light gave me time to replay the moment in my head. Not the raised hand, the certainty behind it. When I walked into our house, Vaughn was sitting on the couch with his shoes still on, staring at the television without really watching it. "Dinner?" he asked. "I ate," I said. That wasn't true, but it felt easier than explaining the knot in my stomach. He muted the TV. "She called," he said. I set my bag down slowly. "What did she say? That you were upset, that you misunderstood something, that you scared her?" I looked at him. She raised her hand to me. He exhaled through his nose. "She didn't mean it like that." I sat across from him. "Vaughn," I said, "your name is attached to a legal financial activity." He rubbed his hands together, a habit he'd had since college. "She's under pressure," he said. "She's trying to hold everything together. And she's using you to do it," I replied. He looked away. "She's my mother." That sentence again. It landed heavier this time. That night, sleep came in fragments. I dreamed of doors that wouldn't open, of papers slipping through my fingers, of clocks ticking too loudly in empty rooms. At 3 a.m, Vaughn turned toward me. "You don't have to do anything," he said quietly. "Just let it be." I stared into the dark. "If this unravels," I said, "it won't stop with her. She'll fix it," he replied. "She hasn't so far." Silence stretched between us. "I don't want to lose my family," he said. I closed my eyes. "I don't want to lose you," I answered. Neither of us slept after that. The following week moved slowly, like everything was happening underwater. Gloria didn't call again. That worried me more than her anger ever could have. At work, I stayed late, requesting documents through proper channels, public filings, tax records, corporate structures. Everything that was legally accessible. The picture that emerged was careful and deliberate. Money shifted between accounts just enough to blur responsibility. Properties owned by one entity maintained by another. Expenses inflated. Income minimized. And always family names attached to shield her from direct exposure. Including mine, I printed everything. Not to use, just to have. The invitation arrived on Friday, family dinner, everyone included. The message was polite, even warm. "I think it's time we talked," Gloria said on my voicemail. "All of us." I knew what she wanted, witnesses. I agreed anyway. Her dining room looked the same as it always had. The lace runner, the polished silverware, the faint smell of lemon cleaner. Elaine sat near the window tapping at her phone. Her husband poured wine without asking. Aunt Carol adjusted napkins that didn't need adjusting. Gloria greeted me with a hug that felt rehearsed. "You look tired," she said. "I've been busy," I replied. She nodded. "You work too much." Dinner moved along with practiced ease, small talk, neutral smiles, careful avoidance. Then Gloria folded her hands and cleared her throat. "I think," she said, "there's been a misunderstanding." Everyone looked at me. "My daughter-in-law," she continued, "has accused me of something very serious." Vaughn shifted beside me. "She believes I would intentionally put my family at risk." Elaine frowned. "What does that mean?" I set my fork down. "That's not what I said," I replied. "I said the accounts are illegal." The word sat heavily in the room. Gloria smiled thinly. See, she said, she's been under stress. I reached into my bag and placed the folder on the table. This is documentation, I said. Gloria's eyes flickered to it, then back to me. This isn't appropriate, she said. No, I agreed, but it's necessary. Vaughn leaned forward. Let's not do this here. Gloria nodded. Exactly, apologies can smooth things over. She looked directly at me. I stood. I won't apologize, I said, but I will explain. Her smile vanished. Sit down, she said sharply. I work in compliance, I continued. I know what audits look like. I know what happens when this comes to light. Elaine's face had gone pale. Mom, she asked. Gloria stood abruptly and raised her hand. This time Vaughn caught her wrist. The room fractured. Elaine shouted. Aunt Carol cried. Gloria stared at her son like she didn't recognize him. I picked up the folder. I didn't want this, I said quietly. But I won't protect something that harms us. I walked out. Vaughn followed. By Monday the family knew. By Wednesday the bank called. By Friday Gloria called me. You think you've won, she said. I think you need help, I replied. She hung up. That night Vaughn sat at the table long after dinner. They're looking into it, he said. I nodded. She could lose everything. Yes, I said, she could. He looked at me. You planned this. No, I answered. I prepared. There is a difference. And that difference was about to change all of our lives. The investigation did not arrive with sirens. It came quietly, in envelopes with official seals, in phone calls that asked careful questions. Gloria did not tell anyone at first. She had always believed silence was a form of control. For a few days, life pretended to be normal. Vaughn went to work. I went to work. We ate dinner at the same table, spoke about the same small things, and avoided the one subject that pressed against every conversation like a bruise. At night I lay awake listening to his breathing. It had changed, shorter, shallower. Fear does that to people. The first letter came addressed to Vaughn. He opened it at the kitchen counter, his hands shaking just enough that I noticed. What is it? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His eyes moved slowly across the page, then back again, as if hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something kinder. They want a meeting, he said. Who? I asked, though I already knew. The auditors. He sat down heavily, the chair legs scraping against the floor. They think I knew. I pulled out the chair across from him. They think your name was used, I said. That's not the same thing. He laughed once, a dry sound. Try explaining that to people who deal in proof. Gloria still hadn't called. That silence felt deliberate. She was waiting to see how bad it would get, waiting to see who would fold first. Elaine called me instead. Her voice was tight, controlled. Mom says you're exaggerating, she said, but she won't show me anything. I leaned against the counter. Did she ever? I asked gently. Elaine didn't answer. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know what's real anymore. I closed my eyes. Neither did I said. Not until I saw the numbers. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. Vaughn barely slept the night before. He paced the hallway at 2 a.m., stopping once to look into the spare bedroom like he was considering running. I sat up in bed. Come here, I said. He did. He sat beside me, his shoulders slumped. I should have stopped her, he said. You didn't know how, I replied. She raised me, he whispered. She taught me right from wrong. And she taught you loyalty, I said, not accountability. He nodded slowly. That distinction hurt him more than anything else. Gloria arrived at the meeting late on purpose. She wore a tailored navy suit and pearl earrings, her hair perfectly styled. She greeted the auditors with practiced warmth. I'm so glad we could clear this up, she said. Vaughn sat stiffly beside me. I noticed how she never looked directly at him. The questions began gently, dates, amounts, signatures. Gloria answered smoothly at first. Then the gaps appeared, small inconsistencies, vague explanations. When they asked about the accounts in Vaughn's name, she finally looked at him. I was trying to protect you, she said softly. His jaw tightened. From what? He asked. She didn't answer. The truth doesn't usually arrive all at once. It leaks. An account here, a property there, a loan that didn't quite exist. By the end of the meeting, the room felt smaller. The auditors stood. We'll be in touch, one of them said. Gloria smiled. Of course. She waited until the door closed before turning on us. You've humiliated me, she said. Vaughn stood. You used me, he replied. She laughed sharply. I gave you everything. No, he said. You gave me your risk. Her face hardened. You think you're better than me now? She asked, looking at me. I met her gaze. I think you crossed a line, I said. She stepped closer. You always thought you were smarter, she hissed. With your numbers and your rules. I think rules matter, I replied. She raised her hand again, not to slap, to point. This ends, she said. Now, I didn't respond, I didn't need to, the process had already started. The consequences unfolded over weeks. Accounts frozen, credit lines suspended, partners asking questions. Gloria's voice grew sharper with each phone call. She blamed everyone but herself. The government, the banks, me. At one point she showed up at our house unannounced. Vaughn answered the door. She brushed past him and stood in the living room like she owned it. You did this, she said to me. I stayed seated. No, I said, you did. She slapped the back of the chair. You turned my son against me. Vaughn stepped between us. No, he said, you did that too. She stared at him, stunned, then something shifted, fear, real fear. The day the court date was set, Gloria finally broke. She called me, her voice unsteady. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said. I listened. I just needed control, she continued. Everything was slipping. I believed her, that didn't change anything. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. She was silent for a long moment. I raised you like my own, she said. I closed my eyes. You raised me to stay quiet, I replied. The house felt different after that. Lighter, sad but honest. Vaughn started therapy. I supported him quietly. Healing is not loud, it is slow, uneven, and it requires truth. The day Gloria's assets were seized, Vaughn cried for the first time since his father died. I held him. Not because she deserved my sympathy, but because he did. And as I sat there listening to his grief, I understood something clearly. Justice doesn't feel like victory, it feels like loss. But sometimes loss is the only way forward. The house grew quieter after Gloria stopped calling, not peaceful. Just hollow. There is a difference between silence that heals and silence that waits. This one waited. Vaughn moved through the days like someone learning how to live inside a different body. He went to work. He answered emails. He nodded when spoken to. But at night he sat at the edge of the bed, shoulders rounded, staring at nothing. I did not push him. Grief needs space. So does shame. The court proceedings began slowly. Paperwork, depositions, long stretches of nothing punctuated by short moments of panic. Gloria's lawyer tried to frame everything as misunderstanding. Clerical errors, miscommunication, but numbers don't misunderstand. They only reveal. Each week, another piece of her life was peeled back. The logistics company lost contracts. The rental properties went into receivership. The catering business vanished quietly as if it had never existed at all. Elaine called me often, sometimes angry, sometimes crying, sometimes just tired. I don't recognize her, she said once. Or maybe I never did. I didn't answer that. Some realizations need to land on their own. Vaughn struggled the most with the idea of public knowledge. He hated the looks, the questions asked too carefully. How's your mom? That must be hard. He started coming home earlier, avoiding social events, shrinking his world. One evening he said quietly, I don't know who I am without her approval. I reached for his hand. You get to decide that now, I said. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't sure how. Gloria appeared in court smaller than I remembered, still well-dressed. Still composed, but the certainty was gone. She avoided looking at Vaughn, avoided looking at me. When she testified, her voice wavered for the first time. I did what I thought was necessary, she said. Necessary. That word followed me for days. People justify a lot under necessity. The turning point came with the testimony about the accounts in Vaughn's name. The lawyer asked her directly if Vaughn had given permission. She hesitated. That pause was louder than any confession. No, she said finally. Vaughn's shoulders sagged. Something closed inside him then, not anger, acceptance. After that, everything accelerated. Settlements, seizures, penalties. The family businesses were gone within months, so was Gloria's influence. She moved out of her house and into a small apartment near the edge of town. Elaine helped her pack. She asked me to come. I declined, not out of cruelty. Out of boundaries. The day the final judgment came through, Vaughn and I sat at the kitchen table with coffee gone cold between us. It's done, he said. I nodded. She's bankrupt, he added. I didn't smile. I didn't feel relief. I felt tired. That evening, Gloria called. Her voice was different, quieter, stripped of performance. I lost everything, she said. I listened. I don't know who I am without it, she admitted. I thought of the kitchen, the raised hand, the certainty. You still get to find out, I said. She was silent. I'm sorry, she said finally. Not for the money, not for the crimes, for losing control. I accepted the apology anyway, not because it was complete, but because holding on to anger would only tie me to the wreckage. Vaughn visited her alone after that. He came home changed each time, less burdened, more present. One night he said, "She looks old." I nodded. Power ages people when it leaves. Our marriage changed too, not dramatically. Subtly, we spoke more honestly, argued more clearly, stopped pretending silence was peace. Trust, once tested, has to be rebuilt deliberately, brick by brick. I returned to my routines, work, morning walks, cooking meals that didn't burn. Life did not become perfect. It became real. Sometimes late at night I think about that moment in the kitchen, the raised hand. The choice to stop it. I did not bankrupt Gloria's family. I refused to be the quiet place where her consequences disappeared. There is a difference, and that difference changed everything. The weeks after the judgment felt oddly unfinished, not chaotic, not dramatic, just unresolved. Consequences had landed, but emotions lagged behind, moving at their own cautious pace. Life does that. It refuses to wrap itself neatly just because a chapter has ended on paper. Vaughn and I settled into a quieter rhythm. He stopped jumping when his phone rang. Stopped checking the news every morning like it might still have something new to say about his mother. But the quiet wasn't empty. It was heavy with questions neither of us knew how to ask yet. The first real shift came on a Sunday afternoon. We were cleaning the garage, sorting through boxes we hadn't touched since we moved in. Old tax files, holiday decorations, things that belonged to versions of us that no longer existed. Vaughn found a box labeled "Mom, Important." He froze. I watched him stare at it for a long moment like it might speak first. "You don't have to open it," I said. He nodded. "I know." But he did anyway. Inside were old documents she had given him years ago, insurance papers, business forms. Things he had trusted her to explain. He sat on the floor and went through them slowly. Each page was a small betrayal, not illegal, just misleading. "This is how she did it," he said quietly. "Not all at once." I sat beside him. "She taught you to trust," I said. "Then she used it." He swallowed. "I defended her," he said. "I doubted you." I didn't answer right away, not because he was wrong, but because blame had already done enough damage. "We both learned something," I said finally. He looked at me. "I don't ever want to be that blind again." Elaine came over a few days later. She looked tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. "I don't know how to talk to her anymore," she said, sitting at our kitchen table. "Everything feels staged." I poured her tea. "It probably always was," I said gently. She nodded. "She keeps asking when things will go back to normal." I leaned against the counter. "They won't," I said, "but something else might grow there." Elaine laughed weakly. "You sound like a therapist." "I've had a crash course," I replied. The community reacted in waves. Some people distanced themselves quietly. Others reached out with cautious sympathy. A few took Gloria's side. She was under pressure. She did so much for everyone. I didn't argue. People protect the stories that make them feel safe. But I noticed something else too. Women I barely knew began approaching me at the grocery store, at work, in whispered conversations after meetings. "I saw what you did. I wish I had spoken up." I'm glad someone finally did. I never felt proud hearing that, just sad it was necessary. Vaughn's therapy sessions began to change him, not quickly, but visibly. He started naming things. Fear, guilt, anger. One evening he said, "I was raised to believe love meant obedience." I nodded. "That's common," I said, "and dangerous." He looked at me carefully. "Thank you for not obeying," he said. "Gloria tried once to insert herself back into our lives. She showed up at Vaughn's office unannounced. He told me about it later, his voice steady. She asked if we could all have dinner like nothing happened. "What did you say?" I asked. I said no. That word carried more weight than any apology ever could have. "She cried," he added. I believed him. "I left," he said. That night I sat alone on the porch long after dark. The air smelled like rain. The street was quiet. I thought about Gloria in her apartment, about the years she spent building control instead of connection. I did not feel satisfied. I felt sober. There is no joy in watching someone become smaller, only clarity. The real test came months later when the legal matters were truly finished. No more letters, no more calls, just the knowledge that the past could no longer reach forward and rewrite itself. Vaughn and I took a short trip then, nothing extravagant, a small cabin near the coast. We walked, talked, said things we had avoided before. "I was afraid you'd leave," he admitted one night. I looked at him. "I thought about it," I said honestly. not because of her. Because of what you chose to ignore. He nodded. I don't want to ignore anymore. When we returned, life resumed its ordinary shape. Work deadlines, grocery lists, burnt toast, but something inside me had changed. I trusted myself more. I no longer questioned whether I was being too sensitive, too firm, too much. That self-doubt had been taught, and it had finally loosened its grip. I ran into Gloria once at a pharmacy. She looked surprised to see me, smaller, unprotected. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. I nodded politely. She nodded back. We said nothing. That silence felt earned. At home that evening, Vaughn asked me, "Do you regret it?" I thought about the kitchen, the raised hand, the moment everything shifted. "No," I said. "I regret how long I waited." He reached for my hand. So much damage is done not by cruelty but by endurance, by staying quiet to keep peace that was never peaceful at all. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it. And sometimes that has to be enough. Time did what it always does. It softened the sharpest edges, but it did not erase them. Life moved forward, yet every so often something small would pull us backward for a moment. A phrase, a memory, a certain tone of voice. Vaughn handled those moments better than I expected. Not because they stopped hurting, but because he stopped pretending they didn't. The first holiday without Gloria felt strange. Thanksgiving arrived quietly without the usual phone call outlining expectations. No seating arrangements, no menu corrections, just us. I roasted a turkey that came out uneven, one side darker than the other. Vaughn laughed and said it had character. We ate at the kitchen table, plates mismatched, candles unlit. It was imperfect. It was peaceful. Halfway through the meal, Vaughn set his fork down. "She would hate this," he said. I smiled softly. "That doesn't mean it's wrong," I replied. He nodded. "It just means it's ours." Elaine joined us for dessert. She brought a pie from a bakery, apologizing for not having the energy to bake. "I didn't realize how much of my life revolved around managing her moods," she said as we ate. "That's how control works," I said. "It makes itself invisible." Elaine sighed. "I keep waiting for her to change." I didn't answer right away. "Sometimes people only change their circumstances," I said, "not themselves." Elaine looked down at her plate. "I don't know what to do with that." "Neither do I admitted. At work I was offered a promotion, not flashy, just more responsibility, more trust. I hesitated before accepting it, not because I doubted my ability, but because I had spent so long minimizing myself that stepping forward felt unfamiliar. When I told Vaughn, he smiled. "You should take it," he said. "You don't shrink well." I laughed. He was right. Gloria tried again to reach out through Elaine. A message passed quietly. "She wants to talk," Elaine said. "Just the two of you." I thought about it for days, about the slap, the denial, the apologies that arrived only after loss. "I'm not ready," I said finally. Elaine nodded. "I thought you might say that." Vaughn and I began having conversations we once avoided, about children, about boundaries, about what family meant now. "I don't want our kids to grow up thinking love means fear," he said one evening. I reached for his hand. "Then they won't," I replied. Those promises felt heavier than vows, but more honest. The incident followed me in ways I didn't expect. A younger colleague pulled me aside one afternoon. "My mother-in-law intimidates me," she said quietly. "I don't know how to stand up to her." I listened. I didn't give advice. I told her my story, not the ending, just the moment where everything changed. Sometimes people don't need solutions, they need permission. Vaughn's therapist encouraged him to write a letter to Gloria, not to send. Just to say what had never been safe to say. He did. He let me read it. It was not angry, it was grieving. When he finished, he folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. "I don't need her to read it," he said. I needed to. The past surfaced again when a former business partner of Gloria's reached out. They were angry, accusatory. They implied I had orchestrated everything. I listened politely, then said, "I didn't create the problem, I stopped covering for it." They hung up. I felt strangely calm. That used to bother me, it didn't anymore. One evening, Vaughn and I sat on the porch watching the sun fade. "I used to think strength was endurance," he said. I nodded. "So did I. I know now," he continued, "that strength is interruption." I smiled. "That's a good way to put it." Gloria sent a card at Christmas, no message, just her name. I placed it in a drawer, not hidden, not displayed, where it belonged. Months passed. Life filled in the empty spaces, not with answers, with presence. We hosted friends. Took walks, planned things again. The story stopped being the center of our lives. It became part of the foundation instead. One night Vaughn asked me, "Do you think she'll ever forgive you?" I thought carefully. "That's not mine to carry," I said. He nodded. "You forgave her." "Yes," I replied, "but I didn't forget myself." That distinction mattered, it always would. The woman I was before all this believed peace meant silence. The woman I became understood that peace requires honesty, even when it costs, especially when it costs. By the time spring arrived, the story no longer felt like an open wound. It had closed, not cleanly, but completely. Scars don't ask for attention, they just remind you where you've been. Vaughn changed in ways that were quiet but unmistakable. He laughed more easily, spoke more directly. He stopped asking permission before making decisions, even small ones. One evening he said almost casually, "I told my manager no today." I looked up from the sink. "For what?" "For staying late to fix something that wasn't mine." I smiled. "That's new." He nodded. I didn't apologize either. Gloria remained mostly absent. She lived in her smaller apartment, kept her routines, stayed within the narrow circle of people who still saw her the way she preferred to be seen. Elaine visited her weekly. I did not. There was no drama in that choice, just clarity. The one time I saw Gloria again was unexpected. I was leaving a bookstore downtown when I noticed her across the street. She looked thinner, less assembled. She noticed me too. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she crossed the street, slowly. "I didn't think I'd see you," she said. "I didn't either," I replied. We stood there, the city moving around us. "I'm volunteering now," she said suddenly, "at a food pantry." I nodded. "That's good." She hesitated. "I lost everything," she said. "And somehow I'm still here." I looked at her. "Yes," I said, "you are." She waited as if expecting something else. I had nothing to give. She nodded once and stepped back. That was it. No apology, no reconciliation, just two people acknowledging what was. That night I told Vaughn about it. He listened quietly. "How did it feel?" he asked. "Final," I said. He nodded. Life continued, ordinary. We celebrated small things. A new job offer for Vaughn, a successful project at work for me, Elaine's decision to move closer to us. The family reshaped itself, not around Gloria, around honesty. One afternoon, Vaughn found the old folder I had kept, the one with the documents. He held it carefully. "You can get rid of this," he said. I thought for a moment. Then I placed it in the shredder. Not out of fear, out of closure. Sometimes when I think back, I realize how close I came to staying silent, how easy it would have been to doubt myself, to minimize, to smooth things over. That realization scares me more than what actually happened. A woman once asked me if I was afraid when I stopped her hand. I thought about it. I was, I said, but I was more afraid of what would happen if I didn't. That fear saved me. Vaughn and I talked about the future differently now. Not as something owed, as something built. "We're not repeating this," he said one evening. I believed him, because now he understood the cost. The story stopped being about her. It became about us. About what happens when someone refuses to absorb harm just to keep things looking normal. About what happens when accountability enters a room where silence once lived. I didn't bankrupt a family. I interrupted a cycle. That distinction matters, because cycles don't end on their own. They end when someone decides the cost of stopping is less than the cost of continuing. The moment in the kitchen was small, almost unreasonable, but it changed everything. And it taught me this: sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not walk away, it is to stay and say no. By the time summer arrived, the story no longer belonged to the crisis. It belonged to the aftermath. That is where most lives are actually lived, not in the breaking, in what comes after. Vaughn and I settled into a steadier version of ourselves, not happier in a dramatic way, just more aligned. We argued sometimes, real arguments, clear ones. Not the quiet kind that rot from the inside, and when we disagreed, we stayed in the room. That alone felt like progress. Elaine moved closer in July, not into our house, close enough to walk over unannounced. She brought a small plant as a housewarming gift. "I'm trying to grow things I don't control," she said. I laughed. "That's a good place to start." Gloria faded further into the background, not erased, just no longer central. She sent a message once asking if we could talk. Vaughn responded kindly but firmly, "Not right now." I was proud of him for that. Boundaries are learned late sometimes, but they still count. The community's memory moved on. Scandals do that. They burn hot, then disappear. What remained were quieter shifts. People looked at me differently, not with awe, with recognition. As if they understood something about me they hadn't before. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. At work, I mentored a new hire. She was sharp, careful. One day she said, "You don't apologize much." I smiled. "I apologize when I'm wrong," I said. "Not when I'm clear." She nodded thoughtfully. Vaughn and I talked again about children, more seriously this time. "What would you want them to learn from all this?" he asked. I thought for a long moment. "That love isn't proven by endurance," I said. "And silence isn't kindness." He reached for my hand. "They'll learn that," he said. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. A letter, not from Gloria, from the court. A notice that everything had been finalized. No appeals, no loose ends. I held the envelope longer than necessary, then placed it in the recycling bin. That felt right. One evening, Vaughn and I sat in the backyard as the sun went down. The grass still wouldn't grow properly. "Some things don't change." "I used to think our life was fragile," he said. I listened. "I know now," he continued, "that it was just unfinished." I smiled. "That's a generous way to put it." I thought again about the moment in the kitchen, the raised hand, the certainty. If I had stepped back, if I had stayed quiet, I would have kept a version of peace, but I would have lost myself. I didn't become stronger overnight. Strength arrived slowly, in small refusals, in steady choices, in the willingness to be misunderstood. Sometimes people ask if I'd do it again. Stop the hand, speak up. Refuse to comply, yes, even knowing the cost, especially knowing it. The truth is, I didn't ruin a family, I revealed one, and in doing so, I saved the part of it that still had a future. There is a strange tenderness in survival. A quiet gratitude for what didn't break you, for what forced you to grow. The story doesn't end with applause, it ends with peace. And peace, I've learned, is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of self. I don't tell this story because it makes me look brave. I tell it because for a long time I stayed quiet. I smiled when things felt wrong. I told myself that keeping the peace was the same as doing the right thing. It is. Most harm doesn't arrive shouting, it arrives politely, with family dinners, with expectations disguised as love. And sometimes it raises its hand slowly, certain you'll let it land. That day in the kitchen when I caught my mother-in-law's wrist, I wasn't thinking about justice or consequences. I was thinking about dignity, mine. I was thinking about the years I had spent doubting my instincts. About the moments I had swallowed words to make others comfortable, about the quiet cost of being agreeable. Stopping her wasn't an act of aggression, it was an act of self-recognition. And everything that followed, every investigation, every loss, every uncomfortable truth was already in motion long before my hand moved. I didn't create the ending. I just refused to disappear inside the middle. Some of you listening might be living in that middle right now. You might be telling yourself it's not that bad, that family is complicated, that you'll speak up later. I used to say those things too, but later has a way of becoming never. What I learned is this: silence doesn't protect relationships, it protects patterns. And patterns don't change unless someone interrupts them. That interruption may cost you comfort. It may cost you approval. It may even cost you people you thought would always be there, but it will give you something back, yourself. I didn't end up with a perfect life. I didn't walk away untouched. What I gained was clarity, the kind that lets you sleep at night, the kind that lets you look at your reflection without flinching. If you've ever been made to feel small to keep someone else powerful, if you've ever been told that your boundaries were disrespectful, if you've ever felt your body react before your mind could explain why, I want you to know this: you are not imagining it, you are not too sensitive, and you are not wrong for wanting more than survival. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pause a moment that's been rehearsed for generations. Sometimes catching the hand changes the future. And sometimes the price of peace is finally saying no. If you had been standing in that kitchen, if that hand had been raised toward you, would you have stayed quiet, or would you have stopped it too? Tell me in the comments. And if this story felt familiar, if it touched something you've lived or feared or survived, don't forget to support the channel and subscribe. You never know whose silence your voice might help break next.